If you've clicked on this video, chances are that you are someone that wants to know how healing works in Guild Wars 2. Well, you come to the right place for that. This video will be the first of a set of 3 that will introduce you to the basics of Guild Wars 2's healing mechanics. You will learn how to apply those mechanics in different game modes, and by the end of it all, you will know everything you need to know to get yourself started with the process of picking the healing build best suited for you. This video in particular will cover things like how healing in this game differs from other MMOs, what kind of impact a healing build can have on a team composition, and how one will go about building a healer in respects to the meta. As of the recording of this video, that meta is the meta of April 2021. As you may or may not know by now, there's an expansion on the way called End of Dragons, and with the new expansion comes a possibility for more support options. So I figured I would try to get this out now before things change too much. You can expect an updated version in the future though. If the other videos in this series are uploaded to the channel by the time you see this, there will be a link to the playlist in the description down below for you. And if they aren't, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell if you want to be kept up to date on when they have been. Without any further ado, let's get talking. How does one heal in Guild Wars 2? The first thing to take note of when trying to answer this question is that in this game, every single class starts off with a healing skill at level 1. This gives everyone, no matter what class, some way of sustaining themselves. Many of those heals are selfish, or in other words, heals that only affect your own character. Ones that affect allies have a target cap in the tooltip. You'll see things like number of allied targets, 3, 4, 5, and so on. The ability has to be stated to be able to affect an ally, since the game does not let you individually target allies with skills. Compare this to Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft, where you can just click on an ally and heal them with a single target ability. That does not make healing Guild Wars 2 any more difficult, however. In my opinion, it makes it a lot easier. The way healing is applied in this game is that either your healing ability automatically targets people around you in an AoE, you direct heals toward them in a cone, or you place an AoE marker on top of their allies directly. This makes healing in the open world very easy to do. You see a stranger struggling against a random mob and you just happen to be a healer who's on the way to some event off in the distance, you drop a heal at their feet and be on your way. No need to even target them. I'll make another comparison to Final Fantasy XIV here. Heals are coded in a way where area of effect healing will only ever affect someone if they are in a group with you. If they are not, you can only really use single target heals to sustain them. In Guild Wars 2, most heals affect up to 5 targets, while some go all the way up to 10, and they will affect other players around you regardless if they are in a party with you or not. Of course, it might be a little more difficult to heal the person you intend on healing depending on how many players are stacked in the same spot, but there are 2 rules to keep in mind when it comes to that. One is that people in your party have priority for heals. Take this as an example. You are a healer for a party of 4 others plus yourself in the open world. Your heal skill affects 4 targets, but your 4 party members require healing, along with a random player that has been following you that isn't in the party. In this situation, your party members will be the ones who receive the heal every time, unless they're at full health. Then that 5th person will receive a heal. This ensures that healing numbers are not wasted. Here's another example. What if you're in a situation where you're not in a party, and are surrounded by upwards of 10 people? Then, healing works on a priority system where the closest to you will be healed first. Then it expands outwards until the skill's target cap is reached. This can make it a little difficult to heal your intended target at times, but moving closer to the center of their hitbox should make the system target them. Since mana does not exist in this game in the form that most people are familiar with, your ability to heal people is only really reliant on your cooldowns and your ability to aim pretty generously sized AoE markers, and like I said before, most of the time you will be right next to allies that you need to heal, so being able to aim at them is not all that difficult. Your designated healing skill slot will not be the only heal you have access to. They also can be found on certain weapon skills, utility swap skills, elite skills, and class mechanics. It's important to familiarize yourself with where these skills are located since you can't drag them to a new slot on the hotbar, so binding comfortable keybinds that you can hit in combat is, well, key. Let's get into more detail about this. You know how to heal your friends now, but what do you need to do to make those heals effective? What exactly makes a class a healer? Guild Wars 2, unlike more standard MMOs, does not have the trinity of tank, DPS, and healer, where your choice of class or class specialization determines what roles you can and can't play as that class. In this game, any class can be a healer due to the way the equipment and stat system works. Each class does not have a cut and dry stat group that they are locked to due to design restrictions. Instead, when you equip an armor piece, it has a variety of different stats on it depending on the item prefix, which is the whole of berserkers, magis, etc. that you see in front of an item's name. So as a healer, for example, you'd want to get equipment with the healing power stat, since it, as its name suggests, increases your healing output. Even so, you shouldn't pick random armor pieces just because they have healing power on them. You want to make sure each armor piece, trinket, and weapon you equip has the same prefix to make sure that all of the stats you're aiming for are getting appropriately boosted. We'll get into more detail about that in a later section of the video. Now, while healing power will increase the strength of your healing abilities, that is not enough to be able to act as a healer. If you only have a self-heal skill or are running trait lines that don't synergize with healing power in some way, only thing you're going to be doing is healing yourself, which, cool, you're helping yourself survive longer, but what about your allies? Some classes are less or more suited to being the role of a team medic than others. Take Thief for instance, and compare it to Guardian. A Guardian can heal a team just fine due to the Guardian's many base abilities and traits that scale with healing, while the Thief, on the other hand, may be free to equip armor with healing stats, but does not have many ways to get that healing out to allies in a way that can keep them alive for over the course of long encounters. For a healer to be effective at what it does, it needs to have cooldowns to be able to pump out its green numbers often, have traits to augment their healing, and have the proper gear to make sure those green numbers are doing enough to make a difference. Health pools in this game can be pretty high depending on the class that someone's playing, so if your heals are only doing 300 to 400 at most per button press, then some things need to change in your setup. Luckily, changing your trait lines is as easy as swapping them out while out of combat, and getting healing power gear is as easy as fighting on the trading post. Let's talk a bit more about the gearing process though, as it goes a little deeper than just needing healing power. While I was in the process of editing this video, they released a little patch note type thing. It said that they were going to change some stuff that's going to be mentioned next in this video. So I'm going to be doing some post-recording to sort of make this more up to date because it's a little bit of a weird situation. Healing is great. It keeps you and your allies alive so they can keep smashing their faces into a boss until its hit point reaches 0. But another important aspect of healing, at least when it comes to the endgame if your goal is to do high-end content like Rage or Tier 4 Fractals, is your ability to give your allies support through boons. But what are boons? You know those yellow icons that pop up over your hotbar whenever you use certain skills or if an ally uses certain skills around you? Those are boons. The little combat augmentations that have a variety of effects like boosting your damage, giving you extra crit chance, getting your health over time, so on. When a boon is applied, and that same boon is reapplied afterwards, two things can happen. It stacks in duration, and depending on the boon, can stack in intensity. In endgame content, a group's healer often wears gear that not only has the healing power stat on it, but also concentration, which makes boons last longer. This places the role of providing boons for your allies into the healer's shoulders, so DPS players can wear nothing but damage stats to maximize their damage potential without having to sacrifice anything. This is crucial when fractals are raised, as boon uptime can be the difference between a short, easy kill and a long, painful grind, and sometimes can even decide if your party will survive an encounter in the first place. When you're in an optimized party or raid setup, it's not uncommon to find yourself with nearly all boons on your person at once. Not all of them are important when it comes to increasing damage output, but depending on the class a DPS player might be using, a trait of theirs might scale with boon amount or will proc if a boon is applied to them. As for the boons that do increase damage output, Might, Fury, Alacrity, and Quickness are the most important for a party to have when it comes to this. Might increases your damage and stacks intensity up to 25 times. Fury increases your critical chance and stacks in duration. Alacrity speeds up your cooldown timers and stacks in duration. And Quickness speeds up your attack animations and stacks in duration. A healer's ability to provide these boons is generally what separates what is seen as meta from what is seen as viable when it comes to the endgame. As it stands, there is not a single healer in the game that has access to all 4 of these boons at once, but what is important is for them to have access to at least one of them. For example, what makes Druid meta is its ability to apply 25 might to allies on top of other things, and what makes Firebrand meta is its ability to apply quickness to allies, among other things. Every class in the game has a method of applying boons to allies in some way, but as every class does not have access to every boon, some become overshadowed by others. But don't let that stop you from developing an interest in playing things that are outside of the meta. Just be aware that there will be looking for group parties and raids lots that will be looking for a specific class, or may not be open to having an off-meta healer, since that means the party has to be adjusted to make up for what may be lacking due to a certain class's absence. But with that, there is always the option to form your own group with your own requirements. Now that we've gone over just how wonderful boons are, let's talk about what equipment you should go for that will give you not only healing power but concentration as well. If your goal is to become a healer in instance endgame content, usually we'll want to obtain gear with the Harrier's prefix. In this comparison that you will see on screen, while a 4-stat armor piece has a higher stat total, individual stats within it take a hit to their numbers to be overall less effective than what a 3-stat piece of equipment can provide. While Harrier's is considered to be the most optimized stat prefix to run as a healer, when you are in the open world, there isn't really a meta for what people should run. People run whatever they want to in the open world, since open world enemies are not designed to be only able to be taken down by highly organized groups. The open world is the perfect place for testing out any stat combination you want, since you'll be in relatively low threat situations. In raids, on the other hand, where everyone is expected to be able to contribute to the team's combat power in some way, is another story. A good resource to read upon about what is meta at the time is the website snowcrows.com. It has many guides, builds, and so on that you can use to learn all you want to know about raiding and what is best to truly min-max your character. With that said, I want to move on to talking about the roles of a healer in Guild Wars 2 and how they compare to other MMORPGs. Like stated before, a healer's job in Guild Wars 2 is to first sustain its allies, and to second provide boons for them. In other MMOs, you will not usually see this kind of gameplay, as you don't typically see a stat dedicated to increasing the duration of buffs, nor do you usually see a healer applying multiple to their allies with the intent of making sure they never fall off. Buffs in other games are usually either something that a class applies to themselves that they have to upkeep during their rotation, or come from long cooldown abilities when they are applied to all members of the raid. Guild Wars 2 does have its fair share of unique class buffs, with a variety of effects. The most common that you will see in groups are the passive traits that increase specific stats for allies, spirit buffs from rangers, and auras that cause something to happen when an ally with one is struck by an enemy. There's also things like warrior banners and renegade spirits. Food and utility buffs that you get from consumable items also exist in Guild Wars 2, but using them does not put the item on a cooldown, and the durations can be preserved by locking out your character. As expected, you want to aim for ones to increase your healing and boon output as a healer. Examples of these would be the buff you get from the delicious rice ball item, which increases healing power by 100 and outgoing healing by 10%, and the bountiful maintenance oil, which increases outgoing healing for every 100 healing power and concentration that you have. These two examples can be relatively expensive to purchase, but there are cheaper alternatives available as well that only give you slightly as powerful buffs. You can only have one food buff and one utility buff on you at once, so be sure to not accidentally override them by using the wrong item. These typically last for 30 minutes, and once they run out, you will see two debuffs appear on your bar called Malnourished and Diminished, which are purple in coloration and depict an apple core and a broken wrench. When you see those, you will know it's time to refresh your consumable buffs. Another combat mechanic that Guild Wars 2 has that can be compared to other MMOs is the barrier mechanic. It's almost like a health bar extension that prevents a character's normal health bar from being affected by damage, as long as the damage taken does not exceed the HP of the barrier itself. It can only be equal to 50% of the target's max health, and always has a 5-second duration. Barriers can stack on top of each other, but will never exceed that 50% health cap, and despite adding to the overall barrier pool, still have their own durations. These means that if you apply a 2500 HP barrier onto someone, and 3 seconds later another barrier is applied, what is left of the initial 2500 HP barrier will disappear, leaving only the second one behind. Barrier, when applied, will appear as blue numbers on the UI, and when damaging an enemy that has barrier, it will appear as yellow. In other MMOs, you may find that barriers might last a lot longer, but will be smaller in size, and cannot be reapplied to a target by the same caster unless either the barrier is destroyed or a certain amount of time has passed, if the barrier still persists. This difference makes barrier in Guild Wars 2 extremely strong as a mechanic, which, such as occlusion, has allowed for some pretty unorthodox healing builds to be traded in terms of what one would usually define a healer as. In a raid squad, you will typically find 2 healers, and most of the time they will split up into 2 different subgroups, creating what is usually referred to as a main healer and secondary healer. This is because many of the skills that apply boons to allies only hit 5 targets instead of 10. Druid is usually put into the main healer role because of this, as a trait of theirs allows them to give might to 10 targets, which covers the entire raid squad. Tempest can also apply boons to 10 targets, which makes it qualified for the main hero position, though Druid is usually preferred over it because of its spirit buffs and spotter passive. Secondary healers usually only have access to 5 target boons or less of an ability to keep up might on their own, so they typically play more of a support role to the main support. You can usually find them topping off might stacks or providing heals to their subgroup in case the main healer's abilities can't reach them. They also take on the role of applying boons that the main healer cannot apply at times, such as quickness or alacrity depending on the class of the secondary healer, so Druid or Tempest cannot apply either to allies. Whichever healer you decide to use can drastically change how an instance run will go. Combining a Druid with a Firebrand will be an entirely different experience from combining a Tempest with a Scourge, or using a Renegade as a party healer and a Fractal versus a Scrapper. Some classes will make things seem almost too easy due to all the things that they provide a group with, while others will definitely cause you to struggle with. But that by no means makes certain things useless versus others. Just because one build is meta and another is not, does not mean that the other build is never worth trying out or using. The builds that the community have discovered exist for a reason. When given the right party makeup and situations to tackle, they have their own room to shine. It's all about creating synergy, and I'm sure that with the next expansion's release, there will be even more room for the community to theorycraft about support builds and team compositions that will be able to compete with what was once considered meta. During the Heart of Thorns days, Chronomancer was the only way a party had access to alacrity and quickness, making it an absolute staple in the meta for years. Then, when Path of Fire released, Guardian was given the ability to provide quickness to the party through the Firebrand Elite specialization, and Revenant became a supplier of alacrity through Renegade. Alternatives were created, and team compositions changed to allow for new ideas to blossom. That's something I will always appreciate about Guild Wars 2. Every class will get a chance to try something new. With that, we've reached the end of the video. Remember that this video is going to be a part of a series of 3, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to make sure that you are kept up to date on when the next parts are released. I hope your year's going great so far, and I'll see you in the next one.